All right, so let's jump right into this story. It feels like something out of like a political thriller.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking potential government shutdown, tons of political infighting, and then, oh yeah, Elon Musk just casually stirring the pot from the sidelines.
Yeah. It's really not that he's weighing in, because he's definitely been vocal before, but it's more like the way his influence seems to be like directly impacting what Congress is doing.
Yeah.
That's what's really interesting here.
It's wild, right?
Yeah.
It's a whole new level of power dynamic.
It really is. I mean, in the past you had, lobbyists, political donors, the media all trying to kind of sway votes. Now you've got like a tech billionaire with like a direct line to Trump who can like mobilize millions of people with a single tweet.
And he did just that, right?
Yeah.
Like when he started criticizing that proposed stopgap spending bill, the one that was supposed to keep the government funded and avoid a shutdown.
Right.
Like Congress seemed ready to pass it, and then Musk's tweets just like threw everything into chaos.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. What's really striking is how his tweets like amplified certain concerns that a segment of the Republican Party had. And to be fair, like these concerns were already there. They were simmering below the surface.
So he wasn't like creating something out of nothing.
Right, exactly.
But he definitely acted as an accelerant.
Yeah.
It's like throwing gasoline on a fire.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, we saw Trump come out denouncing the bill, like right after.
Yeah.
Talk about a chain reaction.
It's a perfect example of that, right? Mm-hmm. And then Musk comes out and claims that, quote, the voice of the people has triumphed, end quote. But it really makes you think, right? Like, is this actually about the people, or is it more about like the outsized influence of just one very powerful person?
Right. This whole thing just really highlights how much power is shifting these days. I mean, Musk, without holding any elected office, managed to like derail a major piece of legislation.
Right.
It's pretty wild. We all know he's got a massive platform with X and, a close relationship with Trump, but this just feels different.
It really does. And I think it's not just about the platform, it's about how he uses it.
Yeah.
He bypasses, all those traditional channels of influence, and he just directly targets lawmakers, public opinion, even the president himself.
Yeah.
That level of access is, it's unprecedented.
It's almost like he's acting as like a shadow congressman or something,
Right.
like wielding all this power, but without any of the accountability that comes with actually holding office.
And that's where things get a bit, concerning. When you have these individuals with this level of influence operating outside of the traditional system, it really raises questions about like transparency and democratic norms.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Remember that comment from Republican Congressman Glenn Thompson? When he was asked about Musk's influence, he just kind of scoffed and said, "Who? I don't see him in the chamber."
Oh, yeah.
I think that really sums up the frustration that a lot of lawmakers are feeling. It's like the rules of the game have suddenly changed, and they're just struggling to adapt.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of resentment there, too. These are lawmakers who were elected to represent their constituents, and now they're being pressured by someone who operates completely outside of their control.
Right.
It's no wonder they're pushing back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Musk's involvement also kind of sheds light on another big piece of this story, which is the growing divisions within the Republican Party itself.
Yeah.
They have this slim majority in the House, which means they need to be like incredibly unified to pass any legislation.
Exactly. Yeah. And as we've seen over the last few years, unity has been really tough for them to find.
Yeah.
The whole ordeal with Kevin McCarthy's speakership and his eventual removal, that was just like a preview of the challenges they're facing.
Some Republicans were hoping that Trump's reelection would bring the party together, unite everyone. But this incident suggests otherwise.
It really does.
It seems like it's actually made the fractures even worse.
Yeah. And this is where things get really complex. You've got different factions within the Republican Party all pulling in different directions. Right.
You have the more moderate wing, you have the staunch conservatives, and then you have the Trump loyalists who kind of operate independently of, any established faction.
Right. It's like,
it's a mess.
It's a three-way tug of war and the rope's about to snap.
Yeah.
And then to make matters even more complicated, Trump suddenly demands a raise to the debt limit.
Right.
This move, surprised even some of his closest allies.
Oh, absolutely. And this demand just throws another wrench into everything. It highlights the fact that there's no cohesive strategy within the party. On one hand, you have these lawmakers trying to address a potential government shutdown, and on the other, you have Trump just injecting this completely separate and incredibly controversial issue into the mix.
Yeah. It's almost as if they're fighting multiple battles on multiple fronts and no one knows who's actually in charge.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the guy caught right in the middle of this whole political maelstrom. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Oh yeah, Johnson's in a really tough spot. He needs to find a way to keep his party unified while navigating all these external pressures from, Trump and Musk, and all this while he's facing the prospect of his own reelection as Speaker.
Yeah, talk about a high-pressure job.
Yeah.
He has to appease all the different factions within his own party, pass legislation that can actually get through the Senate, and somehow avoid a government shutdown. And he's being undermined the entire time by the former president and a Twitter-wielding billionaire.
And then you have moments like Marjorie Taylor Greene suggesting Elon Musk for Speaker. I mean, that's probably not going to happen, but it really says something about the level of chaos and frustration within the party.
Yeah. It feels like the old playbook just doesn't apply anymore. We're in uncharted territory here.
We are.
And it's anyone's guess how this is all going to play out.
Absolutely. It really does feel like we're watching the foundations of American politics just shift right in front of us. And the question is is this just a temporary tremor, or are we witnessing a full-blown earthquake?
Yeah, good question. Let's try to unpack this a bit more. Remember that stopgap bill that the Republicans were proposing? It wasn't some crazy radical agenda or anything.
Right.
They were just aiming for a temporary fix. Suspend the debt limit for Trump's second term, keep the government funded until March, throw in some disaster relief.
It was meant to be a relatively painless thing,
Right.
just to keep things running smoothly.
Yeah, keep the wheels turning. But even that proved to be too much for this fractured Republican caucus to handle.
It really did.
38 Republicans voted against it. They joined most of the Democrats in opposition.
Right.
That's a pretty big number, especially considering what's at stake.
Oh, yeah. It's a clear sign that Speaker Johnson's authority is really being challenged from within his own party. He's trying to appease that far right wing without, alienating the moderates and completely jeopardizing his speakership.
Yeah, he's got this crazy difficult balancing act. If he leans too far in one direction,
He'll lose the other.
Exactly. And with such a slim majority, he can't afford to lose very many votes.
No. It's basically a recipe for legislative gridlock. And we haven't even talked about the debt limit yet, which has become, a political football in recent years.
Yeah, for sure. For our listeners who maybe aren't super familiar with this,
Yeah.
the debt limit is basically just a legal limit on how much money the U.S. government can borrow.
Right.
And if they exceed it, the country might not be able to pay its bills.
Right.
And that would be catastrophic.
Oh, yeah. Huge consequences. And historically, raising the debt limit has been pretty routine. But as political divisions have gotten worse, it's become more of a bargaining chip, a way to get concessions from the other party.
Which is exactly what we're seeing now, right? Trump demanding a raise to the debt limit right in the middle of this whole showdown. It's like a classic power play.
Oh, absolutely. He's using it as leverage to try and push his agenda through.
For sure. And it just adds another layer of complexity to this whole volatile situation. So now Johnson has to figure out the shutdown, manage the infighting within his own party, and deal with Trump's demands on the debt limit.
It's a lot.
It's like a political pressure cooker.
I don't know how he gets out of this without getting burned.
Right.
He's got pressure coming from every direction.
It's rough. And this is where, Musk's influence gets even more, significant. He's not just commenting from the sidelines anymore.
Right.
He's actively, shaping things.
Yeah.
His tweets have the power to sway public opinion, embolden certain groups within the Republican Party, even influence Trump's decisions.
Yeah, it's a level of influence we haven't really seen before outside of, the traditional circles of power.
Exactly.
And it raises some big questions about, accountability and what this all means for American democracy.
Yeah, who is Elon Musk accountable to?
What are his goals here? These are questions we need to be asking, because if this keeps happening, we could see a real shift in power, toward unelected people with these massive platforms and their own personal agendas.
Yeah, it is a little unsettling to think that just one person, no matter how rich or influential they are, could have this much impact on how our government works.
It's a little scary.
It is. We are entering uncharted territory.
Yeah, and the stakes are high. I mean, a government shutdown could, ripple through the entire economy, disrupt all kinds of essential services, and shake people's confidence in the government. And the debt limit, if that's not handled carefully, it could cause a financial crisis that impacts, the whole world.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. But It's important to understand, what's happening here. This isn't just some political drama playing out on TV. It has real consequences for all of us.
Yeah, it feels like we're at, this crossroads. We've got this immediate crisis with the shutdown looming, but then, like, behind it, there's this much bigger question about how power actually works in politics these days, you know? Yeah. And the shutdown itself could impact, everyone, right? Like, essential services getting disrupted, the economy getting shaky, businesses and people feeling uncertain. It could affect, like, everyone's daily life.
Yeah. And it's interesting how this whole thing just kind of shows all the cracks that were already there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the Republicans struggling internally, people like Musk having all this influence, Trump being, unpredictable. These things were all like bubbling under the surface.
It's like this whole shutdown thing just acts like a magnifying glass.
Right.
All these problems become super clear, and it makes you think, is this just like a temporary thing? Or is it a sign that like our whole political system is changing?
Right. So let's talk to our listener for a sec. You're probably thinking, okay, interesting, but like, what does this mean for me?
Well, like I said, a shutdown could mess with services you use, impact the economy. It could make things feel really uncertain. That could affect you directly.
Yeah. And beyond that, it just shows how important it is to be like informed and engaged. More than ever, people need to understand how complex these issues are, why the people involved are doing what they're doing,
right,
and what it all means in the long run.
Don't just like read the news and accept it. You got to sum critically. Ask yourself, who's winning here? Who's losing? What does this mean for our democracy going forward?
And your voice matters too. Talk to your representatives.
Yeah.
Have conversations with people who disagree with you. Get involved in politics however you feel comfortable.
Because at the end of the day, a democracy only works if people are informed, engaged, and holding their leaders accountable. It's not about this one bill or the shutdown. It's about what kind of country we want.
All right, let's take a second to recap what we talked about today. Started with what seemed like, a simple story about the government maybe shutting down. But as we dug in, we found like this whole mess of political maneuvering, people fighting over ideas, and then Elon Musk shows up.
Yeah, we saw how divided the Republicans are, how tough Speaker Johnson's job is, and how much power Elon Musk has, even though he's not a politician. It shows how fragile our system is and how badly we need good leadership and people getting involved.
So as we wrap up here, one last question for you to think about. If this is how things fight over a spending bill, all of this division and outside pressure, what does that say about the future of our government?
Yeah, can our leaders figure out how to work together and actually govern? Or are we heading towards like a time of more instability and gridlock? That's up to all of us to figure out.